Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 368, featuring Sonja Christoph, who, when we left Sonja, way back when, she was working at Massive Entertainment, which was part of Ubisoft and in the gaming world, and she was doing some really interesting things, but she has since left, and she has said that, ever since she turned 40, there was a new career that she wanted to pursue, and she started to explore, and she's doing a lot of really interesting little things, or not so big things too. Kristen, what did you think of the podcast with Sonja?
Well, this is a great podcast for anyone that's like wanting to go into business and learning kind of how you start. So as she explains, it is hard. Her and her husband are supplementing their income with their teaching. And she teaches a blender class on schoolism, I believe it was. And she has about 5 students a session on that. They also still do freelance work, and she's still doing environment and concept art. But her and her husband they're learning programming and developing skills to like widen their skill set until they have enough knowledge to create something. And she said they want to kind of develop their own stories and create either a graphic novel or a mobile game, just TBD. So it's just a good learning, podcast to hear the struggles, but also the how it will hopefully be great in the end.
Yeah, for sure. It's really interesting. She's basically, why not just start something interesting and start something new and sort of get into a new career, and learning to program so that she can write her own mobile game is kind of an interesting thing to do, especially, where she came from. So I think it's really cool what Sonja's doing. I think it's definitely a big learning curve. All the little details that you have to realize what you have to do to basically start your own business. It's not trivial and it's not always creative, and it's very frustrating. But she sort of takes us through that journey and what it's taking her to do that. So we're really happy for Sonja. We think it's really great, and we're very excited to see where she takes all these amazing things. So it's really great to have her back. She's always a really great speaker and a very inspiring person. So thanks so much, Sonja, for coming back and telling us about this amazing journey you're on. And you guys should check out her schoolism class if you guys want to pick up some Blender stuff. I'm sure it'd be a really great course to check it out as well. Okay, we don't have any announcements, but we do. But if people want to know more about the podcast, Kristen, where can they go?
You can go to facebook.com/CG Garage Podcast or chaos.com/CG Garage. And if you'd like to watch us, go to youtube.com/Chaos Group TV.
Perfect. And if you guys have other ideas of podcast member, just email us. labs@chaosgroup.com is our email. And we would love to take your suggestions. And don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating. And we'd appreciate that as well. But for now, please enjoy episode number 368 with Sonja Christoph.
Welcome to another CG Garage, where the Chaos Group talks. You'll know it's over when the last bucket drops. We're gonna fire off rays in high dynamic range. We know that ambient occlusion is passé. Global illumination won't lead you astray. And while image-based lighting is really swell, you need to make sure everything has Fresnel.
So the last time that you and I did a podcast was in 2019. The world was a different world back then.
Yes, it was.
And we've changed a few things. A few things have happened since then. So I thought it'd be good to catch up with you and see how things are going with you.
Yeah. God, where do you even start, right? Oh
yeah.
My God. Yeah, so after we spoke, let's see. So I was still at Ubisoft back then. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I left Ubisoft and I went to IO Interactive, which is a smaller studio. They opened up a new studio in Malmö. And I worked on Hitman 3 there. Great team. It was a smaller team. That was a great experience. And then I got promoted to lead, so that was exciting.
Nice.
Yeah, and then, a birthday came, the big 4-0 for me. And sort of I call it my midlife crisis. But basically, we were like, it would be nice to open up, our own thing or to do our own thing, kind of be our own boss. So we're like, well, no time like the present, right? We're not getting any younger.
Right.
Let's just try it. So we my husband, when I say we, is my husband and I. So we both kind of decided let's make that jump. So that's what we're doing right now. We're figuring this whole self-employed, opening up a business sort of thing out.
Okay. So first of all, let's discuss what this business is and what you're doing.
Exactly. We're trying to figure that out too. So the first part of that we're doing is basically we're teaching. So that's the first part of it. So we're teaching. We're both on schoolism.com. So we're both of us teaching a class there. So we're doing that part-time. And then we occasionally take on freelance contract work as well.
Okay.
So that's something that we're doing also. And then the hope is, or the sort of the long-term goal is that we can start developing sort of our own stories. You know, whether that's, who knows, whether that's a graphic novel, a mobile game, whatever that might be.
Okay.
We're still figuring that out. But to basically create a mobile game, as an example, that's sort of the first project we kind of wanted to tackle in the long term. There's some skills that we need to brush up on.
Okay.
There's some programming skills that, for example, I don't quite have yet.
Right.
So I'm basically looking into C# right now, and I'm getting into programming.
Okay. Wow. This is
Yeah.
pretty ambitious. So you're both teaching and learning and developing and doing a bunch of things. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Just, basically whatever we can, we know how to do and to generate some income to keep us basically afloat until we learn all those skills that we need to have and need to know to be able to create something.
Right.
That's sort of the idea that we had.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, a couple questions. First of all, I don't think we've covered what your husband does, or maybe we haven't, or at least remind us what your husband does. Is he also in the industry?
Yeah. He's actually an art director, production designer. So we're both strong on the art side. So you got the art side covered. Now we need to brush up on the technical side of things a little bit more.
Okay. So what in terms of freelance work, what kind of work are you doing freelance? Like what's your freelancey jobs kind of like?
Yeah, it's pretty much environment art or it's concept art, any of those things. Yeah.
Right.
So right now I'm talking to a game studio, so hopefully I can land a contract there and do some work for them for a new upcoming game that they're developing. Yeah, that sort of thing.
Okay. And what about the teaching part? You're teaching the same kind of thing? You're teaching environment and concept art in that way?
No, so I'm teaching an introduction to Blender class on Schoolism.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is that your primary tool now? Is Blender sort of your
pretty much?
Really?
Pretty much. Yeah. As far as modeling goes, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I've been doing a lot of non-photorealistic art lately, so stylized and like cell shading, a lot of cell shading and just sort of shader experimentation. And Blender is really good for that. It's really easy. It's fun to play with. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of personal work in Blender, and then obviously the game engines, right? So Unreal is what I'm usually familiar with, but now we're branching out and I'm learning Unity. So,
Unity as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have, I was talking about it with a friend of mine, and he said, if you told me 10 years ago that the tools that everyone is going to be using are going to be Blender and Houdini, we would have said that's crazy. And that's really what's kind of happening these days is Blender has become such an important tool for people to use. But I don't think, when did you start learning Blender?
A couple years ago. Yeah. Yeah, I think it was, so I wasn't there in the very beginning. I came onto it a little bit later. But yeah, it just, when I was sort of seeing like it was just catching on and I saw more and more people using it and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try this out. What's all the hype about, right? And then I sort of tried it and I'm like, oh wow, this actually makes modeling fun.
Yeah.
Because it's like, modeling was never something I really enjoyed doing. I just never did. It's always cumbersome. You always have to think about how do I best approach this. It's like, it was just, I felt like you could never be, it was always more technical than creative. I felt like. it's like, how do I get this tool to do what I want it to do? But Blender changed that for me, at least personally. It was just a lot more fluid. It made fun. I was like, oh, I'm having this is cool. I'm enjoying it. And that was sort of what did it for me. And I was like, all right, let's see what else Blender has to offer. Yeah. And it's free. You can't beat that, right? That's
it's free for reasons, but that's good. That's good. I'm actually very interested because, like you said, modeling has been, I started off as a modeler in the visual effects world, right? And luckily I missed the time when people were modeling buildings or with NURBS. Can you imagine?
I had to do a car. I had to do a car with NURBS, and I guess that's curved surfaces, so it makes sense. But that was still such a hard assignment. It's so difficult, especially in Maya.
Trying to, I know. It's like trying to make a car with a quilt. It's like it's just, it's so horrible. But I've heard a lot about this stuff. A lot of people are sort of transitioned themselves to Blender. The big other ones that I've heard is C4D. A lot of people are looking at C4D for doing quick and easy modeling as well. So that's another thing I think is interesting.
Yeah. I used Cinema 4D back in the day, a long time ago, for projection. They had a really good, for like matte painting, that's a really good projection system.
Interesting.
So that was really, really good back then. I haven't tried it in a while, but that was really good. I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think also motion graphics. I think Cinema 4D is really big for motion graphics.
Yeah, because a lot of motion graphics people still want to stay on a Mac, and so that's the only option really they have on a Mac. So, well, yeah, Blender is interesting. I'm very curious about it. Like, what's your thoughts about open source software in general?
I mean, now that we're going sort of doing our own thing, I'm all for it, right?
right, sure.
Because you need to. Those licenses can be quite expensive, and they can kind of add up. Even with subscription fees, that can get very expensive very quickly. So I think open source in general is good as long as it's not too many different add-ons get put on top of it, and then it starts to get really patchworky. Things can break very quickly that way. But so far I haven't seen that. So far from what I've seen, Blender is pretty stable. I will say this though, like I think Blender, if I compare Blender to Clarice, for example, as far as the amount of polygons it can handle, it's definitely not a Clarice. It's definitely not that. So there's definitely a ceiling there, I would say. And this is again all of my opinion. But so it's not. So I wouldn't do like ginormous world planets, whatever you want. Like I wouldn't necessarily do that.
How does it compare to Max or Maya then? Would you say?
Well, I think Maya and Max can handle a little bit more. I've noticed Blender slow down a little bit faster than I would expect Max or Maya to slow down.
Gotcha.
But that again can change. Blender gets a lot of updates, so that could potentially change sooner than later.
Yeah. That's interesting. Okay, well, that's cool, and you're doing stuff in Blender is great, and your class. And so, tell us a little bit about your class. Like, what's you're teaching? Is it like a week class, or is it just videos that people watch online, or how does it work?
Yeah, so it's the whole course is 9 weeks long, and it consists of pre-recorded videos, so one every week, and the videos are usually around 45 to an hour long, and there's a homework assignment every week. And there's two different ways you can take the class. So you can do the subscription model. So you pay a monthly fee and you get access to all the classes on Schoolism that they offer. So you can just watch it at your own pace, learn and try and, take your time basically. And then we also have the critique session, which is basically where we do take it 9 weeks, and you submit your homework to me every week, and I record and give you feedback. I also answer any questions that people might have. Nice. So that's a more personal approach.
Yeah. Cool. And so that's how many students do you usually have? I mean, that's a lot of homework to review.
Yeah, I try to keep it to around five per session. so not too much.
Right.
I feel like 5 is generally a good number.
Yeah.
Because that also leaves me time to do all the other stuff that I need to do, right? So in case I want to take on a freelance job, it gives me time to do that and still answer all the questions my students might ask.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Now, tell us a little bit about your ambitions of creating a game or creating an environment or some story or something of that nature. Like, how did that all happen?
Hey, that happened, I think, a little while ago. You know, there's like when you're always working in games or you're working on films or whatever, you know, there's always something, your brain is always thinking creatively. And you're like, oh, it would be cool if this, or, you know, oh, it would be fun if this, you know. And then, you know, sometimes, at some point, I think we just started writing some of those ideas down. So I have like a little diary that I sort of carry around with me from room to room. And if something pops up, I'm like, ooh, this would be cool. Write that down. Right. And then, yeah, when we were like, oh, this is a cool idea. This is something that we think we could potentially pull off. We're trying to keep it really, really small in the beginning before, you know, get our feet wet, actually see if we can create something, because that's a big question mark. We haven't done this, but we haven't tried this before. So we have no idea. So that's why we're like, okay, what can we do that people would enjoy, that we would enjoy, and that we can actually pull off? And we're like, okay. So we came up with some ideas. I'm like, oh, that's maybe a bit too complex. Let's push this on the would love to do in, you know, 5 years. Let's push this on the back burner. And then we eventually came to an idea, and we're like, all right, I think we can do this, but we need to learn some programming. We need to get some of those fundamentals in. Yeah, so that's where we are right now. Trying to, for one, we're also trying to set up a company. So we're now doing budgets and business plans, which we've never done before in our entire life.
Yeah. I mean, do you do things like get a business loan, or are you actually looking for investors, or?
Yeah, at the moment we're not, because at the moment, you know, we are, like I said, we're taking freelance work and we're teaching. So that's paying the bills. So we're good at the moment. But if we wanted to do like this game, then yeah, the idea is that we ultimately just get to the point that we can put together a prototype, a playable prototype. And then that we can shop around and then get investors so that we can actually hire people full time who know this, you know, much better than we do. That's generally the idea. But yeah, but we wanted to see if we can push it as far as we can on the smallest scale possible.
How do you shop around a game? Like, what do you just go to some game companies and say, we have a game, we would like you guys to purchase it or publish it for us, or how does it work?
Yeah, this is where we're gonna knock on some some friends' doors, some people that we know, and be like, hey, can you put us in touch with some publishers? And that's basically what we planned on doing. So just reaching out to friends and people that we know, and then reaching out to publishers, maybe set up a meeting, and then present them our idea and our game and see what they say.
Okay. And you're trying to do it as a mobile game, right?
Yeah, that's kind of how we wanted to start. Like I said, we're trying to keep it as small, as manageable as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think about the game world, the game, you know, the structure of the game world right now? Like, how do you think, because I've seen mobile games can often make a lot more money than any other games, like the big games in some ways.
I mean, it makes sense because we all have one of these.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we all have one. So that's not everybody has necessarily a PC, a powerful PC or a console. So that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's just ease of access. And I do think mobile games can actually make a lot more money than other games can. They also generally don't take necessarily quite as long to produce. Yep. They're lower fidelity. That means, you can get away with a lot more.
Sure.
So yeah, I think all in all, it kind of makes sense that they're quite successful, I guess.
Sure.
is the word for it.
Well, so okay, so and then also I think it's obviously I spoke to some of the one of the lead research guys at Unity on this podcast, and sort of he was telling me about once those types of tools came around, like Unity and Unreal or whatever. Once those tools came around, it kind of changed the whole landscape of what you need to make a game, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe those tools were, I mean, those game engines weren't available to you and I, right? Before that, they were only available to multi-million-dollar companies and studios. But now we can do it. We can, and I mean, a lot of people do. There's a lot of indie developers, you know, that are just one guy, you know, and they can create amazing games.
Yeah.
So it's exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on how the game, especially, you know, the game engine world has changed in the last, actually probably in the last couple of years since we last talked. It's been a pretty big deal that's happened, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's interesting to see. I mean, I sort of suspected some of that. I mean, especially Unreal is creeping more and more into VFX, right? I mean, not really creeping; it's already there, basically. Right. So I sort of suspected that way back when.
Why do you think that's happening?
Well, I think they've made a big investment in it as well. I think the fidelity, the look of real-time game engines is just, I mean, it looks good. It looks really good. And and just the fact that it's real-time. I mean, it's hard to beat that, you know? It's hard to beat just seeing immediately what the shot is going to look like when it's rendered versus me pushing a button and hopefully nothing breaks and in 4 hours I can check. Yeah, I'm just curious, you know, like to understand, like, you know, obviously game engines are going into the visual effects world. You know, Unity obviously is making those moves as well. They purchased Weta, so they've got some ideas as well. But I'm curious, like, you know, those tools are generally free. So why, you know, there's ideas of like them getting into the industry and like what they're going to do with it. I'm wondering if they're going to start blending the visual effects world and the game world a lot more in some ways. There's not just two separate things, you know what I mean? So it's. Yeah, I think we're starting to see that, right? And also with, some of the work that was done on The Mandalorian, you know, incorporating, you know, they literally have, you know, VFX artists on the set, building the set in the computer right there. So I think that's sort of where the merging is coming, helping directors see immediately on, like, right there on set what this shot is going to look like with the CG background. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where that's sort of coming in, right? So yeah, it's an interesting merger. I just hope that the game development, I hope that not all their attention goes into the VFX world and that the game world gets sort of left behind. Right. You know, that can happen sometimes. So I'm hoping that won't happen because I don't think so. I think they make way too much money in the game world for them. Yeah, I mean, yes, all reality games make more money than film, right? Sure. So hopefully that will continue on. But yeah, I think it's interesting to see to see that merger happening. I'll be curious to see how it continues. Yeah, the reason I'm sort of leading up to this, I'm actually leading this question in some ways, is I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, so you're making a great game, right? And you've also talked about maybe it's a story, maybe it's a graphic novel or whatever, right? Because of what games are doing now and the way that you can operate in these things, you could actually do all of it. We could. Yeah, we could. I mean, the other thing is, and this is also sort of where Blender sort of came in. I was putting together a workshop, and it was a. Sorry, I'm going on a little bit on a tangent, but I was doing a workshop, and it was about composition. And before I knew it, I was like, oh, I'm actually starting to tell like a story. I'm actually starting to like, it was like shots, and then we're putting like, it was a consequential linear story that I was telling in my workshop, and I'm like, oh, this could be fun. Right. I'm like, oh, maybe I should think about the character a little bit more and what's the motivation, the backstory. Before I knew it, I was actually writing. And I was like, well, I already have the character models. I need to, I'm not the best animator, so I would have to brush up on that. Right. But I could also potentially do a short film. Right. Right? The tools are there. They're free. So it just, again, it comes down to, all right, again, maybe I need to get a little bit better at animating. Maybe I need to pick up some programming. But once you supplement some of that knowledge, why not? Right. Do you think that you've obviously have this huge creative burst in the last couple of years, which is great. I love it. Do you think that
obviously the working from home has enabled that to happen.
Definitely. Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's I can be much more efficient. Don't get it's also a challenge, I should say. It's not all roses, right? Nothing is though. That's life. But I can be much more efficient with my time. It's like when I take a break at home, I load the dishwasher. I do a load of laundry, right? But that saves me from having to do that when I get home or when I'm done with work, and that frees me up to do other things. Whereas, if I had to go to the studio my travel time is 5 minutes on foot, so that doesn't count. But other people have longer travel. I mean, when I lived in San Francisco, it was like an hour and a half one way, right? So it was 3 hours of my day just gone.
Same here.
Yeah, exactly. That's 3 hours you never get back.
Right.
So you have that, and then also when I would take a break, I would go to the coffee machine and hang out with people.
Right.
Now, okay, that's something I don't get at home necessarily, so that's a little bit of a trade-off there. Sure. But again, that also allows me to be more productive in other ways.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, especially on the creative field. There's always been talk of recently about the Great Resignation, right? Like where everyone is resigning from their jobs. And what was interesting, I was reading an article recently about how the jobs where the greatest amount of resignations are happening are creative jobs.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because I think that's you seem that article has you in mind when you did it, where like I've been working on creative ideas for a long time, and then suddenly like, wait a minute, I can do something, and it's because I think you've been stuck at home, and you're like, wait a minute, I can think, I have a little bit more time to think for myself. So
it really does free you up, and it's sort of like, you're like, oh, I mean, not saying it's not fun to work for somebody else. It has its
Sure.
pros for sure. And again, now that I'm
steady
doing
paycheck.
exactly, and not having to deal with tax laws. Trust me, that's a big pro.
Oh right, yeah, because
Yeah.
you're in Sweden, right? So I bet you the taxes are pretty complicated up there.
Actually, I would say probably. I think they're easier. My tax return every year is about 1 page long.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's pretty good.
Yeah, but the whole setup of like setting up a company and like a limited corporation is basically what we're going through right now.
Right.
That is a different ballgame, right? There's a lot more paperwork involved.
Yeah.
And especially to somebody who's never gone to business school, that's a whole different story.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Right?
I've actually had to do a little bit of that. We started an LLC. I have another podcast called Martini Giant, and we started an LLC for that because we're starting to, make money selling t-shirts and whatever. And so it was like, we had to do it out of some kind of an entity. So, and then they're like, oh gosh.
Yes. That was exactly us. We're like, but we just do some art on the side. What do you mean we have to open up an LLC? And we're like,
Yep.
oh, hold on. We have to do what?
Yeah.
And
Bank accounts.
Yeah, bank accounts, and those have to get approved in a business plan. I'm like, what does it even look like? I've never even seen a business plan.
Yeah.
Now we have to write one. What? And the budget for the next 3 years? I'm like, good question. I have no idea.
Right.
It's oh my God, and it takes so much time, so much more time.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing that they don't tell you how much paperwork is involved before you get into it, because I think we probably would have thought twice about doing this.
Yeah, and that just the idea that I have to do the same. I have to file taxes for the 12 t-shirts that we sold or whatever.
Oh my God. And it gets even more complicated, right? Like, because we live in Sweden, so I mean, I'm German, so I'm okay, but my husband is American. So, you have to also file taxes in the US every year. And
right.
That now becomes a whole different story. And then if you're an owner of a foreign corporation, there's more paperwork involved, and it keeps going.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that sounds complicated. Okay. All right. Well, but good for people to know, and they should be aware of these things before they start a company.
Yes. There's things you never thought about. And then all of a sudden, before you know, you're like, ooh. I mean, we now have people. We now have an accountant. We now have an attorney. We now have, an accountant in Sweden, an accountant in the US. We have people.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, that sounds great and interesting. But what, what besides the legal stuff, what advice would you give people if they want to try to do this? Obviously, I know you're in the throat. When did you start this, by the way? When did you decide to do this big jump?
Pretty recent. I mean, I released my class, was it end of September last year.
Okay.
So that was sort of my like, okay, we have something that can bring in a little bit of income. Let's do this. Let's take the jump. So I would say October. And then we were sole traders first, and we are now in the process of opening the LLC.
Okay.
So it's all relatively fresh.
Relatively fresh. Okay. What advice would you give people who want to try to do this?
I would say it's several things, right? So the first thing is obviously make sure that you need to be try to be as prepared as you possibly can. So that means, so if you want to do some freelance work, see if you can already line up some clients or have some relationships, right? Something that you have already in the works. So you're not just starting out randomly and like, I'm new, hire me sort of thing. Make sure you have a network, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Make sure you have a network. Make sure if you're teaching that you have something sort of on the horizon lining up so that you have some income to get you started. Right. Then the next thing is, be aware that it's going to take a lot of time, and you're not just going to be spending time creating artwork or teaching or whatever it is you want to do with your business, but you also need to be your own marketing person. You need to be your own business. It's all on you. You're doing everything. If you're selling T-shirts, you need to ship those T-shirts, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like all those things. So it takes make sure that you dedicate time to that. So time management becomes, I think, important. Also figuring out how you spend your time and how much you spend your time, where, and all those things. And then the big one is unfortunately the business part of it. You are going to start running a business, and a lot of legal things are attached to that. So I think those would be my three things.
Yeah, I think it's I think a lot of people have some ideas about like, I want to do this. And you're right. They think it's going to be like, I'm going to do my own thing. It's like, you are going to do your own thing for like this much.
Yes. And also the other thing is like, I've seen, I had a lot of friends who basically took off a year. They had their savings and they took off a year to do what they wanted to do. Very few of them managed to get what they wanted to do done in a year. This is sort of why we're doing what we're doing right now, which, we're basically trying to diversify, what we're doing to make sure that we can sort of sustain ourselves for a long time, that we can try to learn those skills that we don't have, that we need, and then also to allow ourselves to fail in the process, because we haven't tried this ourselves. This is a full new thing. We just don't know if it's going to be successful or not, and we need to be able to fail and then try again.
Right. Yeah, you have to have multiple attempts, right?
Yeah.
At making this work.
Yeah, because, that's the one thing I said to us. I'm like, we have never done this before. Sure, we have experience in games, and we can definitely make it look good. That I can guarantee you, right? That we can do. But there's more to a game. It needs to be fun to play. And for that, you need to have that buffer time. You need to test it. You need to try it out. And I'm like, if we just give ourselves one shot, then we're just setting ourselves up to fail, like from the get-go. We might as well just get another job, Right. So so that was like our whole approach to where we're like, okay, let's make sure that we have something always that can help us stay afloat. So we don't need to go into our savings necessarily, and that we can, make a living and survive and still do our own thing. Yeah.
The thing is, games and movies, they're all hit-driven things, right? So you either make it or fail. And so I think that one of the Angry Birds story is like a good example of that, right? How many games did they make until they got a successful one?
Look at the Goat Simulator. What the heck is that? But it was hugely successful. You never know. But again, that's the whole point. You never know until you try it. But you need to be able to try it once, fail, then try it again. And hopefully, by the second, third time, hopefully, then you succeed.
Yeah.
But all of that takes time. A lot of time.
Have you put any thought in, I'm sure you have, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on there's a lot in the news right now, obviously, with the economy of mobile games, right? Of how those works. Specifically, some people are talking specifically about like, okay, how do you make money in mobile games? So several things is you can just put a price out there and here's $5 for the game or whatever. And then you pay the game or $10 or $50, whatever you want to do. And then there's obviously, subscription prices or ad removals or pay as you go or those
microtransactions.
Wow. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on how you make money on games? Like, how do you think about those things?
I think we're more, I don't even know what the word is for that. I guess more traditional. We're very much like, we're not fans of microtransactions. I think like a one-time fee, I think should be all you need to pay, to be honest. It's probably not the most business savvy model, probably not, but that's where our belief structure sort of comes in. I just, we just don't believe in microtransactions. We never like them. It's not our thing.
But they can be very lucrative for a company.
They can, but that's sort of where the I guess the ethics versus the business sense is going to come in, and I'm hoping we'll stick on the ethics side of things and that we can make that work.
If I see a really cool game, a mobile game, and it's just like $5, then I'll buy that.
I was gonna say, I'm like, I mean, that's at least that's how I react when I see a game. I'm like, or maybe it's like free to play for a little bit to try it out. I'm like, okay, I'm liking this. I like what I'm seeing, and then it costs $5. I'm like, okay, I'll pay that. Like $5 is not gonna break the bank. I'll do that for sure. So so I think that's how we like to play games. So I think that's the goal that we have.
Right.
Whether it works out, we'll have to see.
Yeah. Well, what about obviously just some big things going on right now with Epic versus Apple, specifically about the prices the taxes that people are paying, the 30% tax that they're paying. What are your thoughts on that?
To be honest, I haven't really paid that close attention to that conversation. I have to admit, I have been kind of, we've been a little busy with something else over here in Europe at the moment. But no, actually, I'm honestly not fully aware. I know that they went to court, didn't they? But that was a little while ago, though, right?
Yeah, it's still going on.
Okay.
But basically, it's so when someone buys your game. You get 70% and Apple gets 30%. Right? So they're saying it's the storefront cost, but 30% when you're making
that seems a bit much.
When you're making billions of dollars, seems high.
Yeah, and 30% also just for putting out an icon on a storefront and maybe taking care of some credit card transaction seems a bit steep.
Yeah. So that's part of the conversation that's happening, but it's interesting. I'm very curious about how that affects, especially smaller businesses. Now, Apple has said basically that they're going to massively lower that transaction for companies that make less than $1 million or whatever it is a year. So that could be definitely a good thing for you.
Yes, but but still, I mean, honestly, I mean, if it comes to the point where it's just not, it doesn't make sense financially, then I'm like, well, then Android.
Well, Android does the same thing. That's the problem. So
I guess they all do.
They do. But it's curious. I'm curious. Like there's a lot. That landscape is going to change in some ways. So I don't know. I'm very curious about what that's going to be like and where that can help with little, quote unquote, little startup developers, right? People who are creating these things, because that could affect the way you're thinking as well.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see if there's like another mobile app store opening.
Well, that's actually what's happening with this as a result of this. I think what they're doing is they're making a policy that Apple has to allow the developers to put a button on their thing which will take you to a web browser where you don't have to go through the store if you wanted to, which was not part of the policy before. That's why specifically. Yeah, that's why Fortnite got removed from the App Store, is because they made a button that was against the policy that literally allowed you to buy V-Bucks from a web browser instead of the game. And that would circumvent the 30%. It's so weird.
My favorite quote comes to mind from Jurassic Park: "Nature finds a way."
Yeah. Nature finds a way. Yeah, so it's very interesting. But anyway, I think it'd be very curious. I mean, like you said, like you guys have this idea for this game, and yet there's all this stuff that you have to figure out. So it's gonna be scary. But I think you can. Yeah, you look like you're in good spirits, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just excited to try it. If I'm completely honest, I'm just excited that we're actually just taking that leap. Again, we don't have to succeed. If we fail, honestly, I'm fine with that. But at least we tried it. I think if we didn't at least try it, I would wake up one day and I would regret it, and I don't want to do that. So,
but you went to film school, right? You went to University of Miami, I believe.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
that.
I did. Yeah. Wow.
Impressive. So you were like learning directing, and you were an assistant director too. So you used to tell stories and do things like that.
Yes. And I still like doing. I'm an environment artist, so I still told stories through my environments. Yeah. But it's just and I used to write when I was a kid, and I'm like, it's kind of fun to get back into that a little bit more, and it's fun. I'm really enjoying it, and just sort of the freedom that you sort of get with that.
Right.
Again, it's a lot new, a lot more challenges. There are challenges every day, which is great because once you've been doing this job for such a long time, at some point you kind of it becomes a little repetitive what we do. Fair enough. You do maybe you work on a different show, or you work on a different film, different game, whatever it is. You might switch departments, but generally what you do is still the same. So what we're doing right now, it's something completely different every day, and I'm really enjoying that. I'm like a fish out of water most of the time, but I enjoy that because I'm learning so much in the process. So I think that's why I'm good spirits, I think.
For sure. It was interesting. I remember when I did my V-Ray IRL show, where some of my listeners will remember, it was like I had to become a producer, right? Yeah. And I didn't know. I was like, I see producers do things all the time. And I realized like, oh my gosh, I have to do and I started massive respect for producers all of a sudden, because I realized like if I don't do something, nothing is going to happen.
Yeah, it's not going to get done.
I don't just sit at my desk waiting for things to arrive and then I just do my part. No, I have to do everything. It was crazy to realize that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's also just the exciting part. It's like, I have to do this. Oh, okay, I have to do this. All right, let's figure out how do I do this?
Yeah.
But you grow so much in that process, and you get better with it every time. And I think that's exciting to me. I think that's what drives me. It's like I always want to get better and keep learning. I
think the other thing I think is interesting also, Sonja, is that I'm not going to say it will, but let's say that this doesn't necessarily go in the direction and you have to make some different choices. You're going to grow so much in the process of having done this that you are going to be at a different level. I think that if you go back into the workforce for some reason, you're going to go as a different person and different things. I think that no matter what happens here, something big is going to happen for you as growth and knowledge and skill sets, that it's going to be a big deal. I mean, look at you're learning C#.
I know. Oh my God. I'm like,
Did you ever program before?
I took like one programming class when I went to Noman a long time ago. So I have some knowledge. I can do a little bit of Python, tiny bit amount of Python, right?
Right.
But that's about it. So no.
Okay.
I know what a script looks like. Like I said, I can do some Python. I can figure things. I can look at some code and I can follow it along. I can figure it out. But writing my own from scratch, no, not necessarily. Yeah. So, yeah, this is good.
How do you learn? Do you just find online classes, or how are you learning that?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm fine. I found some online classes that I'm taking right now that so far seem to be really good. I'm enjoying them. Then Unity offers some beginning coding classes as well through their online learning platform. So I was going to go through those first and see how far that takes me, and then see if I need to sign up for a legitimate classroom setting C# type.
Okay.
So that was sort of my approach right now. But so far, I'm learning quite a bit, and I think it's all it's in the Unity context, which I think is great, because C# can obviously go so many places, right? So I don't necessarily want to learn things that I don't need to know. So so far so good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, okay, let's talk a little bit. Why is C# important?
Unity.
Because of Unity. Okay.
Unity.
And so why is Unity important?
So we looked at both, obviously, like I know Unreal. I'm more familiar with Unreal than I am with Unity. So Unity is something that I'm picking up now. And we sort of looked at both of them. And I looked at, so Unreal obviously has blueprints, which are helpful. But they can also be a little bit limiting. So if you can't do what you want to do with those blueprints, then you need to learn other programming language. So I'm like, okay, let's just accept the fact we need to learn a programming language.
Okay.
Let's just accept that. And then I was sort of comparing Unity to Unreal and sort of thinking about the type of game that we want to make. And I have to admit, the Unity interface looks a little bit more clean to me. It looks a little bit more organized than Unreal does. Unreal can be a little convoluted. You have to go through all kinds of checkboxes, and it's
there's a lot of options.
There's a lot of stuff, and I'm like, fidelity wise, like Unreal looks beautiful. Unreal creates some beautiful looking games, but we're thinking about doing a 2D game. I'm like, we don't need all of that. So for us, I think it's like the cleaner, the easier it is to access. And I like how simple Unity does it. You just write a script, you attach it. It's super easy. I'm like, I like that. So that's why we made the decision that I think we're gonna try to go with Unity. Yeah.
I mean, Unity obviously is well proven in the mobile game world, right? Like that's
especially also in the indie market, I would say.
Oh yeah,
it's hugely popular in the indie market. I think for those reasons, if you know C#, you can do anything.
Yeah, how hard is it learning that? I mean, like obviously you're doing it from scratch, but is it like C# is not like C++? It's significantly easier. It's a scripting language, right?
Yeah, it's a scripting. Yeah, it's. I mean, so far, I mean, I'm just going through the basics, right? So I'm just going through. I'm like, okay, what's a variable? What's an operator? I'm going through the basics, basically.
Sure.
But I mean, from what I've seen so far, I mean, those concepts are not new to me because, like I said, I did take one scripting class a long time ago.
Sure.
So those principles seem to be similar. I think it's just mostly like figuring out. I mean, it's just like another language. So it's just like you need to,
Sure.
It's called one thing in English, and it's called, I don't know, it's called, I was going to say kindergarten, but that doesn't make sense. That's a German word, so that doesn't make sense. But, it's called water in English. It's called Wasser in German. So you just need to figure out what the translation is, and then you should be okay. Figure out the little slight different syntax, and should be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What other skills have you had to, like you mentioned, like animation, like I'm not really an animator, right? So like, I can't imagine like if you're doing everything from scratch, it's like, how do I animate something? Like, is that other things you're starting to pick up on the way?
Yeah. I brushed up on rigging skills recently. Oh yeah, I know. I'm an environment artist.
I can't imagine an environment artist doing rigging. Yeah.
I mean, that was my focus. Like, you could basically scare me with characters in school, right? And I was like, I don't want to do characters. And now I'm like, ooh, but storytelling, you need characters for that. So now I'm picking up, getting back into rigging and my skinning skills. I'm like brushing up on those. Those were awful. I'm like, oh, I'm starting to get the hang of it now, though. Yeah. So a lot of things. I have a long laundry list of things that I want to get better at.
Are you doing that in Blender too?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ah, that's cool.
Yeah, there's actually a really fantastic add-on for it, so I don't have to do it from scratch. And it's called Auto Rig Pro, I think. Fantastic add-on. It's so good. So I use that, and it does quite a bit of the setup for me, and it works really, really well.
Right.
And then I've just learned I just need to figure out how to fix some of the skinning issues after the fact, or some of the deformations, and yeah, it's pretty cool.
Look at you, environment artist doing rigging.
I know. I even managed to bring over like mocap and get that onto my character. I was like, oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I actually do have a question about mocap. I've been working on this little idea of a virtual production sort of thing that I've been playing around with. And I'm trying to say, like, I don't think, my whole thing is like, you don't need to build out $1 million motion capture stage to do mocap. I think you can do it in other ways, right? So there's other, like, have you thought about doing your own mocap?
Well, there's a bunch of new software. There's actually one that just came out. I think what's it called? I think Plask.
Plask. Have you heard of Move AI?
Yes, I have actually.
That's
yes.
Markerless. It's just with a bunch of GoPros.
I mean, but it's now getting to the point where you can literally just record yourself with a phone, upload the video, get it analyzed by an AI system, and then you get the mocap data back.
Yeah, I literally, like, I took, I captured the facial capture for the character I was doing was just literally an iPhone driving a live link to, it's called Live Link Face, and it just drives the Unreal thing directly.
Yeah, it's
like
insane.
From a phone, live.
It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the days of, I mean, obviously if you want to have something really high fidelity, you still want to have a mocap studio, right? But I think the tools are getting so good.
I think it's going to become less and less that,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I think that the AI tools specifically are filling in all the gaps of that were, needed for high fidelity. That, like, they invent all this stuff for you, right?
I mean, I was impressed. I downloaded a video from online, and I tried it out with the software, and I was amazed. I mean, this was just a single angle, a character walking, like a side view, and I mean, the leg was hidden at time, the arm was hidden, but solid. It interpreted it perfectly. And I'm like, wow, that's insane.
Yeah, and I think that's great is that these things are starting to pop up more and more and more because which is going to enable people like you to do the things you want to do, right?
But that's why I think like now is like the perfect time. Like it's never been better. Like the tools have never been easier. They have never been more accessible for people to actually go out there and create their own content, tell their own stories. Of course, that also can create a flooded market really quickly. So that's the other challenge, right? That's the downside to that.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
man,
but
I love
think,
it.
but,
It's
but,
exciting.
but we already covered how much work it takes just to get started beyond learning the tools.
That is true.
So
that is true. It's not,
so I think that it's not just like anyone can do it. Like, yeah.
it takes time and dedication and a lot of work.
I remember I went to go, this was maybe 20 years ago. I went to a talk. It was a thing where it was John Waters was talking, right? He was talking about filmmaking, right? And people were asking him all kinds of questions. This was, like I said, it was ages ago. It was just when those HD camcorders were coming out, right? Where you can get a camcorder that would record in HD, which to them was like, that's film quality or film resolution at least, right? And so he said, what do you think about the fact that anyone can get an HD camera now and make a movie? And John Waters was like, I love this. Anyone can make a movie. Not everyone should.
That is very true. That is very true. That is very true. That is very true.
So I thought it was like, yeah, he's right. But I think it's great. I think what you're, but the thing is, people like you don't necessarily have to pick up on all the technical skills. You can sort of use a lot of these things that are coming out, which I think is very exciting. Yeah,
and that's why, that's honestly, that's why I looked at the mocap situation, because I'm like, I'm not the best of animator, but I'm a human, I can move. So if I can figure out how to record myself and get that in, we're golden.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really great. I think people are going to really start taking advantage of all of these things, and I don't think it would have happened. All of these AI tools, I don't think it would have happened or been inspired unless the game engines have sort of started the train moving and then everyone's kind of like doing their thing, So I think that's really interesting. Okay, one last topic I want to ask you about, especially I'm curious as a concept artist and an environment person. I had a chat the other day, or yesterday actually, with the Kit Bash 3D guys.
Oh yeah.
So they also create a bunch of things so that people can tell their stories. And I think this is a really interesting idea. What are your thoughts as a concept artist about like what they're doing or what the, the the environment of like assets of creating environments, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts about that?
I think as an environment artist, I think that's all great because you can buy those assets. I mean, there's a lot of asset stores out there right now, also for ArcViz, right? There's a lot of them.
Sure.
It's all great because it can get you started and you can quickly put something together. I think it's all great for that. Now, if you're thinking more for a concept artist, then I mean, your job is essentially to come up with ideas, right? So it's like a lot of times then I would say, what is your design? Like, what is your unique interpretation of the design? So if you're using a pre-made asset that somebody else designed, that's not really your design. So how are you using it? How are you changing it would be my question. So
that's interesting because their number one customers are concept artists, and that's
which is interesting.
but they don't make it. What's interesting is they don't make that's specifically how they thought about kit bashes. They made it so it's modular and that you can take it apart and reassemble it and stuff like that. But I'm curious, like it's like because suddenly like I just need to make something really quick, and it's like you don't have to build it from scratch every time, right?
For that part I think it's great. Like if you need to put something together quickly, I think that's great. But if it's something that's like highly designed, like I'm thinking like Tomorrowland, that was highly designed. Then I think you really need to find that unique design language. And I think at that point I would say try to do that from scratch.
Yeah, but I'd say I'm just really curious about that. So because I was like, I wonder what Sonja would think about what they're doing because they're growing like crazy and they're doing a huge amount of work and stuff. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with it. I mean, I love the stuff that they do. I think it's great. I think again for me especially, actually, I think I used some of the kits for one of my things that I've done too. So I think it's great if you need to quickly put together like a city or something. It's amazing. Like I said, for me, it comes down to if it's like a very specific thing that you're really trying to handcraft something completely from scratch. I think you should try to come up with your own assets and your own kit bash kit to just really make it your own.
Do you have that yourself? Do you have a bunch of things that you've made?
I do collect.
Reuse?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's no reason to, build a fire hydrant 10 times over.
No.
Yeah. Do it once and you're good.
Yeah. It was funny. I remember we were when I was working on Day After Tomorrow, and we had to do build pretty much all of New York, right? And then they decided they were going to distribute the work to all these students. So all of our models of all of our buildings get distributed to all the visual effects companies. Like, well, great, we built it all, and now you guys all going to use it for like decades. Yeah.
But I mean, it makes sense. Like there's no point in having to redo everything over and over again.
Sure.
Why?
Sure. Yeah.
Why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, I agree. Well, listen, this is very exciting. I'm very excited to hear what's going on. Obviously, I know it's still very much in the development phase and early, so you're not going to be able to give us specifics of anything. But I can't wait to follow up more on this. But do you have a company name?
Well, we're just in the process of applying, so we have to see if it gets approved by the Swedish government.
Okay.
Right. It goes through a process, but so we have to wait and see. So
all right. Well, I think it will be good to find out what that is, and we can let people know. And then, what was the name of the school that you're teaching through?
It's Schoolism.
Schoolism. Mm-hmm. So we'll put that link on the site as well, so people can check out the classes you're doing. But yeah, this is great catching up with you.
Oh, so nice chatting with you. I know, especially last time. It was much more, I would say, formal setting. So it's fun to kind of
Sure. Yeah. And you've been on our Total Chaos things and our 24 hours of chaos and all of that stuff. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
Do you have any update on that? Do you think it's going to happen in person this year?
I don't know. Have you heard? We've had a big merger, so I don't know.
I know. But I'm just like, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? What's going to happen?
I don't know. Right now, I mean, I'm not talking. When I talk to Vlado and Peter, they're like, well, we're dealing with this merger, which is a great news, by the way. We're very excited about it. But it is. I think it's. I haven't actually heard about Total Chaos or anything of that.
Fair enough.
But I'm sure something will happen at some point soon. So we'll just figure out when and what.
Awesome.
Perfect.
But yeah.
was great chatting with you, Sonja. Thank you so much.
It was amazing. All right. Have a good one.